All right, so welcome back to Health by God's Design. This is the fourth of 12 sessions, and this one is on mental acuity. Now, mental acuity is the first of the 6 pillars of health, and there's a really important reason why it's first. And it's because we have to get our perspective right. If we get our perspective right when it comes to how we look at where we're going, and what our capabilities truly are, then it actually creates a seamless transition from the place that we're at to the place where we're trying to be health-wise. Now, one thing I want to say is it's really interesting when we try to set our own goals, because sometimes we set goals for our health that are not in line with reality. And the reason why I say it that way is sometimes we either undersell or oversell our potential or our expectations for ourselves, or we start believing things from others that have nothing to do with us. And so today, really what I want to do is focus on clearing some of that up and having a healthy perspective of where we're starting and where you're actually going. And that way you can have a lot of really encouragement along the way, but a lot of clarity along the way. And it helps not get discouraged along the way as you start to implement more practical changes. Now, over the last 3 sessions, we've been kind of taking a 10,000 foot overview of how health works from the inside out. We did a 10,000 foot overview of the 6 pillars of health, and then we really dove in pretty deep scripturally last week on identity in Christ. And so now we're going to go ahead and dive in to the practical parts of these 6 pillars, how they work, how they play with one another, and then what we need to do about it. So I'm going to actually be giving you some homework from this session so that you can start to make some real changes. And right now, it's all about getting your mind and your focus right. So mental acuity, when we went over the 6 pillars of health, we defined mental acuity as having a right perspective of yourself, an accurate perspective of your actual health potential, and then also the ability to create a clear roadmap of practical changes to get from where you are to your actual potential. So we're going to go through all 3 of those today in much greater detail so that you can really have a good idea of what you need to do. Now, I actually sent you an email with a tool called the 6 Pillars Self-Assessment. Now, that email and that assessment is a way for you to gauge where you're at according to the 6 pillars of health. These really are the baseline standards. I'm not going with diet and exercise and asking you to do a food journal. In fact, you'll never hear me do that. And we're not going to talk about, exactly where you're at exercise-wise, although I am going to give you some practical tools on how to make those changes as well. The 6 pillar self-assessment is an assessment where you can answer some questions and gauge your health according to those 6 pillars of health, so you can start to see if you have some strengths or weaknesses. So I'm hoping that you find that there's a couple areas where you're really strong, whether it be mental acuity, emotional fortitude, nutritional saturation, or some weaknesses in those areas or others, even like chemical purity or neurological clarity, physical discipline. I want you to get a good idea of your strengths and weaknesses so you can really start to look at yourself not with judgment, but with an accurate perspective, like looking at yourself in the mirror clearly. Now, sometimes when we look at ourselves with a little bit of distortion. We look at where we're at in a distorted way, and we can also look at our perspective or our potential in a distorted way. And so I wanted to share something with you because I think this is really an interesting way to look at it. And it's just a simple chart. This is the easiest and simplest way I could possibly describe what mental acuity is. that when we're mentally acute, that means we are in our right mind. We are accurate. For example, if you were 200 pounds overweight, you were morbidly obese, and you could acknowledge I am unhealthy and morbidly obese, you're actually mentally acute. You're sharp. You're in your right mind. You are thinking correctly about what's going on. But if you were 200 pounds overweight, morbidly obese, and you say, I don't have a problem, like I'm doing great, I feel great, I don't need anything, I'm doing wonderful, you really are moving towards delusion. And I do use that word on purpose. It is a very strong word, but it's a word that's even used in the Bible a lot, especially towards the end times, that people will be deceived by a strong delusion. Being delusional means you are so far from reality that it's hard to even communicate with you. I'll give you a really good example. I was actually visiting my friend in Washington State. We're actually doing some outreach, and I asked this lady if I could pray for her in the grocery store. Lord just put her on my heart. And she said, well, you can pray for other people. I was like, well, can I pray for you? And she goes, well, other people need prayer. And she kept like deflecting away. And so I asked some questions, and I was like, well, what's going on? Like, are you okay? And she goes, well, a lot of people like me that have survived cancer, it's a very rough road and a very rough future, but you just keep on doing it. I'm glad you have a great attitude. Just keep praying for others. And she couldn't actually accept the fact that she needed help. She had actually already given up that she had worth or value or any sense of the fact that God even loved her. And so she was actually to the point where she was self-deceived, but she still wanted others to have prayer, but she was so closed that she couldn't actually receive anymore. It was actually not mentally acute. It was moving towards that. But I have a better example. I had a patient one time, and this woman was about 150 pounds overweight. She had extreme low back pain, and she would come in and she would always want me to adjust her back because it would make it feel better. So I would adjust her back. But the more time went on, the worse it got. And the work I would do would not relieve it. She would be holding her alignment. I would adjust her when necessary, but her pain increased and increased and increased. And I started telling her, I said, you have to make changes in your life. You have to move more. You have to try to get your body moving, even if it's walking around the block or half a block. You have to do it. You don't really have a choice because this is going the wrong way fast. And then finally, one day she got angry at me and she said, Doc, you keep adjusting me, but you're not making me better. And I said, whoa, hold on. I'm actually doing everything I possibly can, but you are so far down a road that's actually harming you that you don't have many options left. I said, I've been telling you things that you need to do to change, but at this point, you can't even do any physical activity. You can barely be on your feet. And because of that, you're really left with one last change. I said, you are going to need to change the way you eat. It is really your only option. And she looked me square in the eye and she said, I would rather die than change the way I eat. And she was still mad that I wasn't making her better. And I said, well, you're going to die sooner than you think if you don't make these changes. And she kind of, she just stayed hard at me and basically kept her nose to the grindstone on one direction, which was the same direction of self-destruction. And a year later, she died of congestive heart failure. And it's a really sad story. I knew her family and everything, but they knew she refused to make the changes, but she wanted to be healthy anyway. And she wanted things that could not fix the problem to fix the problem. And when they didn't, she got angry. And it was literally delusion. She was so far from seeing the perspective of what she had to do to get well, that I couldn't even touch it. And so I share this story. It's a hard one. It was very sad to walk through, but I share this story because that's on the extreme end of delusion. On the same note, one of the things that can be delusional is when you're actually doing really well in an area, but you don't see that you are. Men and women have this differently. I've met, and I'm just saying this as a general trend. By no means am I saying this as a blanket statement, but I think guys can be a lot more delusional, especially guys that are trying to build muscle, and they'll think they're really small when they're actually really muscular. And it's kind of delusional. And so they get almost obsessed with building more growth, more everything. They don't actually realize they're extremely fit. I've seen a lot of that with men. There's all sorts of things that can be wrong about men. I've also seen men who are in incredible pain, but when you ask if they need any help, they go, "No, I'm totally fine. I'm doing great." And I look at them, I'm like, "Stop lying. Like you're not actually doing yourself any favor by acting like you're in less pain than you're actually in, or trying to normalize pain when pain fundamentally is not normal." On the flip side, a lot of times when with women, I've had to walk a lot of women through seeing themselves as very unhealthy and constantly trying to drive themselves towards weight loss, but not realizing they're starving their bodies out of the nutrition they need to get well. I've noticed a much greater trend of women moving towards diet plans and a much greater trend of men suppressing any need for help. It's not universal by any means. It's just a big trend I noticed as a doctor, and also just talking to a lot of people. But the reason why I'm sharing these is I want you to look at this and say, when I think of myself, do I think of myself either more positively or more negatively than what's really real? And so I'm a straight shooter. I always try to be as blunt and direct as possible, not because I'm trying to hurt anybody's feelings or make it harder to hear. The reason why I do that is so I can help people see themselves very accurately. So I don't engage in flattery ever. I hate it personally when somebody does it to me. I try to really help walk people through understanding where they're at, because it's really the only way to make accurate and wise changes towards better health. One of the tools I've used to help with that as a bit of a self-assessment tool is this roadmap to health. Okay, so this is the what I call the roadmap to health, and this is probably one of the most influential little charts I've ever been able to come up with, because it really gives a perspective of what's going on. So you see on the left side of the roadmap, we have birth. That's the beginning of your life. And from left to right, time is going on. So the right side would be death by natural cause. You of old age, you live out all your years. That's great. On the top, the very top line is ideal health. And the very bottom red line would be death, but it's because your body fails. So it'd be earlier than the end of your life, living out all your years. When you're born, typically you're born with pretty decent health. And so your health stays good through a good chunk of your life when you're first born. But as we get exposed to toxins, as we eat less than ideal food, as we start to sit around in school because we're not moving as much as we are really created to naturally move, then our health starts to deteriorate into less than ideal health. And so as we go through, usually like kids don't have many problems other than getting a sniffle here and there, maybe some chicken pox, things like that. So health may be going down a little bit, but there's this point where a lot of us start to experience pain in our body or a symptom in our body. And so what I have is this yellow line called the pain threshold. And so let's say your health has been deteriorating a little bit, but it's still up here. Your body won't hurt and won't be expressing really any symptoms, because at that point, you still haven't broken down enough for your brain to give you a little bit of a red flag, which is what we call pain. You see, pain is only an indicator of a problem. It's not the actual problem. It's just saying, hey, there's something going on down here. The same thing is true with a check engine light in a car. The check engine light, when it goes off, is not the problem in the car. It's the indicator that there is something wrong with the car under the hood, so you might want to take a look. And so when our health goes down, 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 we finally cross this pain threshold, and let's say we get down here, we typically, in this nation, we go to the doctor, and we go to a doctor and we say, hey doc, my body hurts, something's not right. I don't know what to do. And so we get checked out, and I'm giving a very generic example of what often goes on. But when we go to the medical doctor, they go, okay, well, let me give you this drug. And so you get a drug for whatever condition it is you have, or the pain you have, or the blood pressure problem you have. And the doctor didn't actually get you well. You didn't suddenly go up in health. Instead, he took the pain threshold, he or she took the pain threshold and lowered it. So now your pain threshold is here, but your problem is up here. So you don't hurt. Problem solved, right? But that's not the problem solved. You see, the problem with this is that it actually left you in the same condition, but changed the way you feel about it, or your ability to even perceive the root of the problem. And so now you go along, through life, and your health actually continues to get worse, which is not a good thing. And so as it gets worse and worse and worse, because we haven't changed our behaviors, we just took a drug to change the symptoms of the problem. If you continue to accumulate toxins, now you're taking an additional drug, which is toxic to your body. You're not eating that well. You're not exercising the way you're supposed to. Maybe you've been under a lot of stress. Your health is going down, and finally you cross this pain threshold again, and now you have a problem that's down here, which is below the new threshold, because the drug that you were on lowered it. So you go back to the doctor and you go, hey doc, I have this problem. I don't know what to do about it, but my body hurts. And so the doc goes, okay, well, I have something for you. I'm gonna give you another drug. And instead of it getting you well, oftentimes all it's doing is it's lowering the pain threshold down to here. And now we don't feel the problem anymore. And this process repeats where we go, hey doc, ow, my body hurts. I need to go check it out. And the doctor checks it out and lowers the threshold over and over and over again, until finally our health is so bad, there is no drug strong enough to stop it. And that's when we go, I've been to so many doctors, I've tried so many drugs, and I don't know what to do. And when you get to these lower points here, you have a decision to make. You can either continue to behave the same way you've been behaving, which has gotten you into this place, or you can start to look at the root of the problem and realize that although you're taking all these drugs, you are no better, and you start to change the way you live. You change the decisions that you make, and you start to change your actual baseline health. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Let's say you start going upward along this trend here. Maybe you're still on some of these drugs, but you're eating better, you're exercising more, but you're still taking these drugs, which would probably be wise, because if you stop taking the drugs, for some people, it would almost kill you because your body's so reliant on the drugs to even function because it's not healthy yet. But on the way up towards better health, you're actually still in a lot of discomfort, because you're below that pain threshold. And so let's say you keep going up, 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 and you get above that lower pain threshold. So now you're not feeling anything. So then you start to get off a few of those drugs. Well, guess what happens? The pain threshold shifts. And now your health is down here, which is much better than where it was before, but your pain threshold is higher than your actual state of health. It means you're going to hurt again. And I've walked so many people through this where they start to get off of drugs. They make choices to stop taking drugs, but their health is improving, and they're actually feeling worse in the process, but getting better. And so this is really important to understand, that when you start making changes and you start making radical decisions, that you're actually going to experience discomfort as you're getting off these drugs, until finally you cross over the natural pain threshold without any drugs, anything managing your symptoms, and you're actually really healthy way up here. And that's an interesting point. Because at that point, this is where I find that a lot of people have to make their second set of very important decisions. The first is this: now that they don't hurt, they no longer try to grow. They say, I don't hurt and I'm not taking any drugs. I'm finally healthy. And so they kind of just plateau right there. But there's all this room to grow all the way up to optimal health. And if you continue to make the great changes and improvements in the way you live, you can actually start to experience health in its most optimal form by continuing to engage in more and more activities that support ideal health. The 6 pillars of health are really your way of continuing to engage in activities that move you towards optimum health, even if you don't have pain. See, a lot of people say, oh, I could never do that. Well, you're not going to if you have that attitude, because that's the kind of attitude that stops you from participating in the things that actually get you to the places you never thought you could go. Whether it's physical fitness or just feeling amazing, or engaging in some passions that you've had, or being able to play with your children and grandchildren without any limitation in your body, whatever it may be, engaging in those 6 pillars and constantly refining yourself according to those 6 pillars is going to be your way of getting there. And so the 6-pillar assessment that I gave you is to help you understand where you're at. This roadmap to health is really to help you understand, all right, I have some real changes that I need to make to get to ideal health. And I'll give you a couple ideas of what ideal health really looks like. And I think one of the best ways I've heard it, it's summed up in what's called the 5 signs of life. This is a concept that was presented by B.J. Palmer and early chiropractors, but I thought it was one of the most condensed ways of looking at how healthy your body actually is. And so 5 signs of life are this. Assimilation is the first one. Assimilation is the ability for your body to take in material and make it a part of itself. And so it's really what we call eating, but we assimilate air, we assimilate water, we assimilate food, we assimilate even light and turn it into vitamin D. And so the ability for any organism, any living thing, to take in something from the outside of it and make it a part of itself is what we call assimilation. Your body should be able to do that at all times. A lot of times when we end up chronically malnourished, it's a sign that we are not assimilating things correctly. If we're dehydrated, even when we're drinking water, it's because we have a breakdown of assimilation, okay? When we can't get enough oxygen into our system by breathing regularly, it's a compromise of our ability to assimilate. And so a healthy organism can assimilate all necessary nutrients and elements that it needs in order to operate ideally. Excretion is the next one. So your body should be able to eliminate any toxic waste from it and any excess that it no longer needs. That could be anything from expired cells of your body, red blood cells getting out of your body. It could be getting carbon dioxide out of your lungs because it needs to get out of your system. It could be sweating. It could be detoxing. All of those are forms of excretion. So is urinating and pooping, because we don't want things in our body that need to get out of our body. Otherwise, it actually creates toxic accumulation, which will harm your body. So you should have good flow through your body between assimilation and excretion, keeping your body only as lean and efficient as it needs to be for optimum function. So any decrease of intake or any accumulation of waste will harm the body. The third one is adaptation. Your body's supposed to be rapidly adapting to all scenarios that it encounters. And this is really important because if we don't adapt, then we can be greatly harmed. So whenever we have a need of our body should change to meet that need. If we ever get threatened, our body should go into fight or flight because we need to be able to fight or run from a situation that could actually harm us or move quickly out of the way from something. If we are about to fall over, let's say we trip over something, you want to adapt by rapidly changing the way your muscles contract so that you can catch yourself without falling. Adaptation takes many, many forms, but basically it governs all changes that go on in the body, adapting according to the needs of the body. If we exercise more and we grow more muscle mass and bone density, that's adaptation, and it should happen. And if we don't adapt, our body will actually break down over time and accumulate degeneration instead of adapting and regenerating, which moves us into growth. Growth is important because growth is two main things. It's the ability of our body to grow to full maturity, and really any living organism to fully grow and develop all the parts to their full design that was intended by God from the beginning. So there's a seed planted with an idea of the end in mind. We need to reach that end. And that's a fullness of growth. And the second is that we would grow to meet the demands of the body. And that would include things like growing muscle mass, growing bone density, even growing by adding fat when we need it, like during certain seasons it's appropriate, or in certain environments, like colder environments, it would be appropriate to accumulate some level of healthy fat and then to be able to get rid of it when it's no longer needed. So growth is a definite sign of life. And if you stop growing, it's a sign that you're not expressing that same level of life. The fifth is reproduction. And this is two main things. It's the capability of cellular reproduction. So your body is always making new cells and replenishing itself. A good example is this. Every about 5 minutes, the stomach lining inside your stomach that is touching the acid inside your stomach, but every 5 minutes that lining is replaced. So there's new cells coming up because it's being scorched by the acid, new ones are coming up, and it's getting replaced and replenished constantly. If you don't replicate or reproduce those cells at a correct pace, you could end up with holes in your stomach and things like ulcers. So we want healthy reproduction of all cellular activity at the appropriate rates to keep your body functioning right. And then the last part of that is also just the ability to reproduce yourself. So for people, it's having children. The ability to be reproductive is a sign of life and an expression of health. And sometimes when that is compromised, some of it does have to do with a body that's not healthy enough to sustain it. So for men and women, it's different, but for men, it would be the inability to produce literally seed. We call it semen seed sometimes, and you're just not able to reproduce of yourself. And for women, there's a lot more that goes on in women's body when it comes to reproduction, because you are the bearer of life. A baby grows inside of you, and so a healthy body is a healthy environment for life to grow. And sometimes when it's compromised, that system will be stunted because it's not a healthy environment for another life to grow in. So it's one of those signs. So that's the 5 signs of life. But we should be able to experience things on the outside, things that we feel when we're healthy, and that's that our mind should be sharp and accurate. right? That we need to have this in mind. We should be thinking clearly, sharply. We should be able to memorize things and recall things and come up with words quickly, efficiently, and be able to articulate them well. All of that has to do with a sharp and accurate mind. Our body should have no pain, because if we have pain, it's an indicator of a problem. So a pain-free body, especially if you're not on any medication to mute any pain, is an outward sign that your body is actually operating pretty well, because nothing hurts. And I'm not talking about just gritting your teeth and bearing it. I mean actually feeling well in your whole body. When you take a moment and you stop and you think about it, you go, I don't have any pain at all. That is a great sign that your body is functioning quite well. And you should experience the full function of your body. So that means that anytime you want to go do an activity, you don't have a physical limitation to that activity. That is a good sign of health. Now, when we talk about physical discipline, I'm going to give you some examples of some really extreme people that to them, they're not being extreme, but to us, it's like 110-year-olds doing amazing things that you would not even expect from a 50-year-old. I'm going to save it till a little bit later, but the reason why I want to show you is I really want to help you understand what the actual capability of the physical body is, so that you can reshape your perspective around physical activity. So when we have this in our minds, right, that our body should grow appropriately, reproduce, and replenish appropriately. We should be able to take in food when we need it and any other nutrients of any type that we need, get rid of any toxic waste whenever we need it, and adapt at all times. We should feel amazing, have no pain. We should have full function and capability of our body, and our mind should be sharp and accurate. That is an accurate and right perspective of what our capability should be. Okay. I love this example in the Bible of Joshua and Caleb. So Joshua and Caleb went into Canaan. They were with Moses when Moses left Egypt. They went through the 40 years in the wilderness with Moses, but they led Israel into Canaan, and they led the army. So Joshua led the armies. Caleb was right by his side. They were the two that were faithful and believed God, and they had to fight and beat everybody in Canaan. And when they first went in, Caleb went to Joshua, and he asked that a certain area would be his inheritance. And Joshua agreed, but they had to go clear out the rest of the land first. And they fought wars and battles for years. And when they finally came back to the first encampment, Caleb went to Joshua and he said, I would like to go take my inheritance now. And Joshua said to Caleb, well, do you want us to go with you? And Caleb said, no, I'm as strong now at 80 as I was when I was 40 from the coming and the going in the war. I'll go take my land. And Joshua gave him the thumbs up, and Caleb and his men went, and they took this city, and they took his inheritance. And I love that story because he had such an accurate perspective of his actual capability. He wasn't saying, I'm 80 years old, I'm feeble, but I want to act tough. No, he was literally tough as nails and fit and knew it. And he wasn't bragging. He wasn't overselling. He had a right perspective of his real capability at 80 years old and knew he could go take over an entire city in hand-to-hand combat with his guys. And I want you to think about that for a minute, because he knew how healthy he was at 40 as much as he did when he was 80. He didn't lose perspective, and he didn't end up in delusion. He was not a delusional warrior. He was a very mentally acute warrior. When you are going through this process, it's really important for you to check in regularly to know where you've been before, where you are now, where you're going, and along the way be able to look in the mirror and evaluate yourself and accurately say, hey, I'm much more physically active than I was before, or I'm much more nourished than I was before. My energy is much better. I'm much more mentally clear than I was before. And I want you to do that, but without ever taking your eyes off of the fact that you should have a very high standard on the horizon for yourself. And the reason why I want you to keep that high standard is it's very easy to make your goal your own experience rather than your actual potential. When you let your experience, your personal experience, dictate your optimal health, if you've never actually lived in optimal health, then you may be selling yourself short of what you should be able to experience. And so I don't want you to shift the goalposts along the way when you encounter like a roadblock or a little bit of discouragement, because when you shift the goalpost, that means you either you now have the wrong perspective or you used to have the wrong perspective. Your body is designed to work. God built it that way, but he just built it with certain rules in place, which are these 6 pillars that you have to do, or they have to get right in order to grow. So I'm going to give you 3 main points of encouragement for how do I put this? I'm going to give you 3 main instructions for you to be able to move forward well. And that's to be wise, to be weird, and to be a little bit wild. So be wise means this. You should make wise choices when it comes to making changes in your life. A good place to start is obviously to do this 6-pillar self-assessment. But then you should write down some clear goals and make them high goals. And when you start to make changes that are in line with the 6 pillars of health, because if you do that, that's going to allow you to experience better health in a guaranteed way. It's not because it's something I made up, it's because that's how your body is wired. Be a little bit weird. What that means is you need to not care what other people think. See, I think it's a little bit weird when somebody wants to take a bunch of drugs and think they're actually being healthy because they feel better, but they're literally numbing themselves to their own health. But I'll tell you, sometimes I'm the only person in the room that's advocating for making the hard choice to be uncomfortable with the change to get to the next step. And people think I'm the weird one in the room because I think working hard and making these wise choices and going with principles instead of methods, I think that's the better way. So don't be afraid to be a little bit weird. Don't be afraid to be scrutinized or questioned. Don't be afraid to be a little bit made fun of, because when you start to make those changes in your health, when you are leaner, fitter, and more energetic, and your mind is sharper, all the people that were criticizing you will start shutting up and start asking you how you did it. So don't be afraid of being weird in the process. And the third is be a little bit wild. And all I mean by that is don't be afraid to take healthy risks within healthy boundaries, okay? Healthy risks within healthy boundaries allows you to be able to really thrive. But it also allows you to learn lessons you wouldn't learn if you wanted a risk-free path towards better health. And I don't think there is one. Because here's the thing, no one feels what you feel. No one craves the food that you crave. No one thinks the thoughts you think. You're the only one in your own head. And so you're going to have to make decisions on a daily basis. And some of those decisions are going to be risky. Some of them are going to be very wise decisions, but it will feel risky because you've never made a decision like that before. So if you start to do that, just be encouraged that being a risk taker, being willing to experiment a little bit with your body just to feel how it went, as long as it's within those healthy boundaries and the healthy framework of how your body is built, I encourage you to take some risk to make change. Because quite honestly, if you hire a trainer, if you hire a nutritionist, if you hire a doctor, you are taking a risk by listening to their recommendations, and they don't even live inside your skin. I have to make recommendations to people and I don't feel what they feel. I have to try to perceive what they're experiencing. Then I have to be able to try to understand what the cause of that is, and then I have to give recommendations according to my perspective of their situation, and I only see them for really only a few minutes out of their life. And so I, like, even seeing a doctor like me is risky, just like it would be for any doctor, because I don't live your life. I take risks for myself, but quite honestly, I can make very wise decisions or recommendations for my patients totally in line with my scope of practice, and it's still technically a risk for someone to listen to me. It could be a great decision, but there's a measure of risk because it's something different than what they were doing before. Okay? So, all that to say this. I want you to move forward encouraged. I want you to continue to root yourself in God's word as well as some understanding of anatomy and physiology. And we're going to really get a little bit more anatomical in the next session as we dive into emotional fortitude, because we start to talk about the brain activity, the limbic system of the brain, the way our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs start to change the way our body work. And you're going to start to see how this thing is put together in a really incredible way. But mental acuity is really about keeping your perspective right. Now, I'm going to send you 2 tools as well. And first, if it's later, I'm going to be putting this inside the course. I want you to watch 2 additional videos. One is called the mindset of sustained success. So the mindset of sustained success is a 40 to 50 minute webinar that I did. And it helps you really understand how to keep that right mindset. So we go over negative and failure type mindsets. We talk about victim mentality, different mentalities that we have, but also ways of thinking that you can keep that really help you focus on right behavior and move you in the right direction. It's very powerful. The second is priorities and boundaries of healthy people. That one is about an hour long as well. And I talk a lot about how to set healthy boundaries up for your life in right priority order so that it allows you to say yeses and nos in ways that lead you to better health so you can actually be in people's lives better. When we live a boundaryless life, it can cause a lot of damage in our life because we say yes to everything, no to nothing, and we end up so cluttered we can't even see straight and we can't even keep our priorities in order. We end up failing ourselves, destroying our health, hurting our relationships, and really becoming highly unproductive. And so priorities and boundaries of healthy people is a very powerful webinar, but take the time to watch it this week. I'm going to send it to you tonight. I'll put it on a page so you can see that one as soon as possible. Listen, this is so important that we get our mind right, because if our mind is right and our perspective is right, then we're going to think right about how we should eat. We're going to think right about how we should exercise and have good physical discipline. We're going to think right about making decisions on whether something is toxic for our body or if we need to actually detox our body because we understand we've been accumulating toxins for a long time. All of that is dependent on having a right perspective. So please take the time. You have the email. Take the time to actually fill out that 6-pillar assessment, evaluate yourself. And if you have any questions, I want you to email me. I'd be happy to walk you through that. But this is for you to look at. And then you're going to be able to do this 6-pillar assessment in a couple months and see a massive change in the way your body's functioning, because you will notice a difference, and you're going to start to get these 6 pillars very strong and make some very serious changes in your health.